Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're just going to talk about why I really like Ad Orientem, and I wish all Masses were Ad Orientem. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti, Amen. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut erat in principio et nunc et semper et saecula saeculorum. Amen. Ad Orientem means toward the east. To the west would be ad occidentum. We don't really use the word oriental anymore. That's kind of seen as a pejorative term in general. But Ad Orientem means toward the east. And so when it comes to liturgy, I think most of you guys would know, Ad Orientem is when the celebrant, the priest, and the congregation are facing the tabernacle during Mass. You still see this done in traditional Latin Mass and in the ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter. Those are two rites. You also see it done in most, if not all, of the Eastern rites. Not all of them, but most of them, you'll still see it done over there. And really it was in the 1970s when they rolled out the Novus Ordo Mass that they, in the spirit of Vatican II, changed it and went from everybody in the Latin rite, the predominant rite here for most Catholics in the world, went from Ad Orientem to facing the congregation. Now, if you look historically, from what we can tell, it looks like in the first millennium, Mass was done actually toward ad populum, toward the people. And then around in the Middle Ages, medieval period, then it went Ad Orientem, at least in the West. And we have an episode here how we had the Mass before we had the New Testament, and some other episodes about what the early Mass was like. We're not going to spend too much time on that. So why do I like Ad Orientem? Well, I think it kind of goes back to the old phrase lex oriendi, lex credendi, lex vivendi, and that if you go to churches that have Ad Orientem or do the Mass Ad Orientem, you just tend to find a more reverential Mass. It's just one of those, I don't know if it's correlation, causation things, but you just tend to find a better Mass, a more reverential Mass. And I think it goes kind of back to the heart of what the Mass is. Despite the song Table of Plenty and all these other songs like that we've had for decades now, the Mass is first and foremost a holy sacrifice. It's the sacrifice of the Mass. It's also a remembrance of the Last Supper. It's a non-bloody sacrifice, not a re-sacrifice, because Christ only died once, but it's a remembrance. But it is a holy sacrifice. We are offering our sacrifice. If you think of the prayers that we do during Mass, especially during right after offertory, we are saying we're offering our sacrifice. So we are offering our sacrifice. The priest, as persona Christi, is offering his sacrifice, which is Christ, to God the Father. That's what the Mass essentially in its essence is, for lacking all the other kind of subtleties and nuances. It is a sacrifice. We're offering a sacrifice. Like in the Old Testament, what did they do? They offered sacrifices in the form of lambs or goats or whatnot. They offered a sacrifice. We're still offering a sacrifice. Sadly, we've been so poorly catechized the last few decades that most Catholics in good conscience don't even know really it's a sacrifice, or they really don't know what it means. So when you look at Ad Orientem, it's easier to remember that, because if you go to places that do Ad Orientem, whether it be TLM or let's say the ordinariate, because those are the two most well-known to most people watching this, because you're Latin right. Especially in the TLM, you don't even hear the Eucharistic prayers. It's just mumbled, but we're all facing the tabernacle. We're all offering our sacrifice toward the tabernacle with the crucifix right there, and it kind of reminds us, it's like a unifying force, what we're all doing. Whereas when you do ad populum, the issue is people get confused, because now the priest is facing us. And I think if you talk to some priests, they would tell you that because they're facing the congregation, and we know that the Novus Ordo Mass tends to be much more interactive in terms of he says something, we say something, he says something, then there's a song. It's all this interaction. I think that kind of lends to a much more performative Mass. And even if the priest doesn't intend it, it's going to be more performative because he is facing the congregation. Now, you will have priests who've really played up the performative. They'll do, jokes in the middle of Mass. They'll do the anniversaries and the weddings and all these things in the middle of Mass, and they're almost like an MC of the banquet. And so you'll get those. But the juxtaposition is, you can go to a TLM And you will not even pick up the personality of the priest at all, partly because he's facing ad Orientem, and on a couple of times during Mass, he does need to turn toward us. But as a whole, there's like no personality that you get, aside from whatever you're getting in the homily. But when you're doing ad populum, I just think priests, either consciously or unconsciously, have to add like a performative aspect to it. And I think also the kind of the optic, maybe a lot of people don't look at it this way, but we have our back against the tabernacle. That just doesn't seem right, to have our back against the tabernacle. And for these reasons, and it's mostly just because of lex oriendi, lex credendi, lex vivendi, that I wish that all churches in the Latin Rite would be ad Orientem. Now they can be. Last I remember, I think it's the bishop, who is the ordinary for that diocese, has the right to allow ad Orientem. I don't know, and you guys can post in the comments, if a particular pastor at a parish can do ad Orientem without the consent of the bishop. And it would be a shame if bishops don't allow ad Orientem. They really would. I mean, doing a Latin Mass is one thing, but ad Orientem, I think that you would see, and we've talked about this, like what pastors who have a parish that is sparsely attended on Sunday Mass, what they can learn by going to a parish that is overflowing with people. Well, that's typically going to be the churches that have more reverential masses, because people gravitate toward that. They gravitate toward the reverence that you find in these masses. And so one of the things they could learn, you would think that if the bishop had humility, he'd be like, okay, let me check. Our Lady of Suburbia, as Father McTeague says at the Catholic Current, Our Lady of Suburbia has 1/5 full on Sunday 11 a.m. Mass. And Our Lady of whatever, Grace, has overflowing. What can we learn? Oh, they have ad Orientem? Oh, maybe they do communion on the tongue and kneeling, and they have altar rails, whatnot, or they have more reverential music. Oh, maybe we should implement these things so all the parishes will be more likely to be filled up to the pews. And from a bishopric perspective, and I'm not going to say this cynically, but more people coming in to the churches would be more money in the coffers. But I think this is kind of like an obvious thing. Like if the masses that are doing ad Orientem, in addition to some other things that we used to do, are overflowing with people, maybe we should bring that back. So in closing, I just feel like the masses that have ad Orientem tend to be more reverential and therefore tend to have more people. And why wouldn't we want to go to a beautiful Mass that you feel the mysticism, you feel the real presence, you can feel the angels there during the consecration? Why would we settle for something less? Like if you can have filet mignon, no one is going to go to Jack in the Box. No offense to Jack in the Box. Why are we settling? And I just wish that we just had ad Orientem. Guys, post in the comments. I'd like to hear from you if you agree or disagree with me about ad Orientem. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.